watch lineage. They're all, no, these are just their brochures. These are not.
You'll have to find out where he was getting that. Yeah, and know where he was. Oh, well, thank you. Yes, we enjoy it.
But we have people who are sitting around. Make sure you get there.
We'll find out Tuesday. Make it all the weekend.
Okay, so it's inside.
I'm going to call you
There we go. I wanted to help her all day long, and so I told her, I said, be careful. Drum roll.
let me know if I can buy. So what did you do? I didn't get a chance to see this.
This is our
No, this is surgery.
Okay, so it's pretty
Significant other. Yes.
You're the traffic director.
My mom, she told me that like a long time ago. This was me.
Yes, it's for me. Yes. Raleigh, there is so.
I saw that.
Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, you have. They told me you have one.
No, I don't.
It is for me, but you don't have it.
Right, I just looked at it.
Does it look familiar to you? That's your copy.
Oh, this is open.
Did you eat
Oh, you have one too.
Oh, Celeste. Ellen. Okay. Thank you.
You know Raleigh doesn't have one.
2 years ago, and hi Bobby. How are you?
Rack for so long with our business that she finally needed to have one direction change.
Yeah. Did you eat
Oh, you have one too.
Oh, Celeste. Ellen. Okay. Thank you.
You know Raleigh doesn't have one. Somebody goes support him.
We had to sleep. So just get it. Takes time. So Raleigh.
If it's come down. Okay, Sharon. Hi, what can I get for you?
Yes. Keep it in a safe place and not be up.
Saw you today without doing my tour. You were coming out of the office. You were on the
You guys have good ones to take care of.
Yeah, the boys.
They do. That's nice.
This seemed like such an interesting thing, so I'm glad Sarah, Larry, Sharon,
I also know your son. You don't? Your son.
I don't have to.
Oh, Blair? David.
Oh, David.
Okay. I don't know. Barbara.
Sienna get
driving by and then when Seymour told Heather guys
Coach.
So they have something at high tide.
They do.
We know a fair amount about what was done for 1906.
Before
Before
that.
that, there was 1906 from Scouts and Guides. 1906.
Oh, yeah. I know about this. We were talking about this guy.
Yes, we're more like 10. You can get refreshments and a little dessert if you haven't. So, and I know you're really tightly in here, so if you want to wave your hand to us, we'll bring you something. So, but first, not surprised. Okay, so just sit momentarily and we'll be right with you. So 5 minutes. So we'll give you 5. How about that?
Yay!
Thank you.
Oh, I know. God, nobody could be in there, right? Parent, child, dog, everybody down there. I know. And some people can do stairs. Refills. I know. We gotta love Jennifer.
Once pass the glass down, we'll fill it up. What a gesture. This museum has a
Is this the perfect one?
just like the ball game. Now you have
It's a delight. Come in and they're having I think
with fire. Yes, exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. We are excited for this feature presentation. I'm glad that each of you value the museum and are here tonight just to learn more history, an aspect that many of us are still learning, the pre-1900 history. So we're delighted with our speakers here this evening. I have one announcement regarding the community meeting tomorrow morning. Each of you should be there, 9 a.m. at the fire station. So all of you, if you can, attend. But more than anything, we're glad you're here tonight with our community. It continues to grow and flourish, and we're just so excited for having these two wonderful presenters who have built a lovely history of pre-Collins, something so important to who we are as a community. So Celeste and Arline, Heidi, we are just so delighted that your role as docents have led you here, and you have created a beautiful walking tour, which some of you have taken. So if you have not, they offer this, and so many of you have the information in front of you already. So many of us can speak of how important it is to know your local history. So we're delighted that you're going to share something new and visually present it. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Jennifer. What a lovely introduction. That we didn't really deserve that. This is my partner in crime, Heidi Palmer. We live within a block of each other on the island. We met 37 years ago on Balboa Island down at Meoni's Pizza. Meoni's Pizza. Our husband, my husband Bob, and her husband Brad started working 37 years ago at Fireman's Fund Insurance on the same day. We were both brand new in town. They were here from Utah. Bob and I had just moved down from Seattle, and we were raised down here, but he was up there in school. And I kept saying to him, we really don't have any friends. And so I kept saying to him, isn't there anybody there that we could be friends with? And he said, well, there's one guy who dresses really nice. I said, okay, I'll take anything. So he set it up. They were living on Little Island. We were up in the bluffs, and we met. I remember she was wearing turquoise and white check pants, and it was destined for us to be friends forever. So Heidi has said, ever since I've known her, when I'm retired, we're going to do walking tours on the island. Well, 2 years ago she retired, and so that's what we started to do. This morning we did a tour for 12 lovely ladies from Occidental College, and Heidi lost her voice. We thought this will be good, we'll be all warmed up, we'll go through our material, we'll know everything great. Well, we weren't planning on that. So she has kind of a croaky voice, so she's going to sit over here and prompt me to do her part. So you want to have a seat? So our topic tonight is a lot of SHs, right? Shipping, shaking, shipping, and sheep. A short history of our shores prior to 1900. So y'all know what happened in 1902. That's when Collins bought this land. So we're going to stop right when we get to Collins. And I think it's something that a lot of people, especially in our docents, why we put in this, it's all about the river wall on the other side of this, because they could all tell you what happened when Collins came, but not everyone could tell you what happened prior. And that's really important to see how we got there. So here we are, Heidi and I, in our walking tours. We're going to give you basically the first hour of our tour. Our tour takes about an hour. We say 2 hours, but it's really 2.5 hours by the time we get back to the museum and show off our museum. So, so if you want to call and book us for a tour, you only need the last hour. So here's the disclaimer. I think that 90 to 95% of what we tell you will be true. We read every single one of those books and own them. We also checked a bunch of books out of the library, countless oral histories we listened to, websites, all kinds of different information, watched things on TV, a stack of newspaper articles, and every single one of them has a different story. So we have different dates, and I'm reading it and it's like, well, that date can't be right because this guy didn't even come here till then, so he couldn't have done it in that date. So everybody contradicts. When we go back to, this is the 50-year history of Newport Beach, and the 100-year history, the first book was written in 1931 by H.L. Sherman, not Sherman Gardens Sherman. We just learned that at the top of we went to a speech about Sherman Gardens this week. He was a distant relative, but he wrote the first one. It's out of print and I can't get one. It's the only book I cannot get my hands on. But this book retells a good part of that. And so many times if I just can't get the right answer from 5 different people or other books, I'll go back to the H.L. Sherman book because I think it's written in 31 and it's probably the least distorted view of things. And I continue to read things all over the time where other people have quoted people are wrong. So I hope that I give you a pretty good overview, but don't hold me to it. If you come up to me later and say, well, I heard it this way, I'm going to say, I heard it that way too. Because we've heard everything, haven't we? All right, so that's our disclaimer. And if you want to borrow any of those books, we have them at my house. All right, so here's the big question. How did we get here in the first place? Okay, there's obviously different views on this, but this is what I'm going to give you now.
Okay. Yeah.
65,000 years ago in Africa, people. All right? Is this worrying you? You knew this was a 2-day talk, right? Okay, people walked out of Africa. Is this right? Okay, I hear myself. Up through and over to Europe, up and down to India, up through Asia, look at it up here. They got up here and there's a land bridge at that time, so you could walk from Siberia into what is now Alaska. And they probably were chasing a mastodon or something, so that encouraged them to go across there, and then they start coming down. And it's cold up here, and so they're thinking, well, let's get down to some warmer area. They keep going, and they pass by us. And some of them probably stop here, and I'll tell you why they stopped here on the next slide. But most of them kept going, and we know this from carbon dating, that they went all the way down to South America. And then they got down there and they started to get colder again. So they came back up, and some of them said, I remember that nice river up there, let's go back up there. Or my grandmother told me about that because it's generations later too. So that's how we got here in the first place. But why did we stay? The reason that some of them stopped and the reason that we stayed is because we have this beautiful Santa Ana River. It's 100 miles long. It starts in Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear, Mount San Jacinto, lots of streams and creeks that feed into it. But it was a raging, roaring river during the Pleistocene era, and it gave us this huge underwater basin of water, which is why we have such great farming here. And so you can see it runs down here, but it's also fed by all this up here. The ancient ancestor of the Santa Ana River, like I said, during the Pleistocene era, carved our west cliffs and east bluffs. Does west bluffs and east cliffs sound right to you? No. Yeah. No. So our west cliffs and east bluffs were carved by that river. And as it carved through here, because this is a roaring, raging river at that time, it also carved a very deep submarine trench out of our upper bay onto our shore, because there is no peninsula at that time. The natives that came down originally were nomads. They were following herds. They had pottery. They were very different from the Native Americans that we had hundreds of years ago. These are the natives that we had on our shores hundreds of years ago. They didn't really live down on the beach like this. They lived up on the cliffs, but this would have been like a little fishing village where they would come down and dry their fish. Very peaceful people. They lived in these huts. They didn't live in teepees because they didn't need to pick them up and move. Wouldn't you want to live here? Nice climate, lots of water, lots of food. You have grizzly bears, you have cougars, you have coyotes, you have lots of antelope and deer and all the fish you can eat. So they had a very good life, although 65% of what these people ate were acorns. You ever eat an acorn? It tastes like crap. In order to eat an acorn, you have to dry it for 3 years, smash it up, bleach it with water, and make it into like a poi. These people didn't have pots and pans. They had to boil it. These people are known for their basket making. They could weave a basket so tight that it would hold water. And by transferring hot lava rocks into it, about 8 rocks, you've got boiling water. Because they had to boil it in order to eat it, and they ate like poi. It took a lot of work to make it. The women made it. You ate it hot one day, and the next day you ate the leftovers cold. So they had the time to go out and do basket weaving and do other things at that time. Lots of information on the Indians, but that's all I'm going to tell you now. I call them Indians, Native American, whatever. They had canoes, and they had a reason they needed a canoe, because you got to get to Catalina. There's groups of Native Americans that live on Catalina Island, and Catalina Island has soapstone, and soapstone is one of the stones that you can actually carve a bowl out of, and also little trinkets that you might want to use in your religion. So it was a lot of incentive. You couldn't go over to Catalina and take stuff; you'd get killed. People lived there and they owned that stuff. You could go over there and trade. They didn't have bears. You could go take some bear skin or bear meat over there, and they would say, "Okay, I'll give you this for that." So you wouldn't want to go over there and trade. They didn't wear a lot of clothes because it's not that cold here, and so another reason to live here. The girls wore little grass skirts and maybe a rabbit cape, and if the men were doing something like carving arrowheads or something, they put like a leather apron on so they just didn't get hurt, because you guys would do that too. All right, this is what our shoreline, I think, would have looked like around this time, prior to 1825. We're going to flip up to 1825 and come back to the 1500s, but there's no sand spit, there's no peninsula. It looks like Laguna, because that hasn't formed yet. There's no Balboa Island, and this is what I think is important for you to know. This didn't look like this. We would have been sitting in the water right now, in pretty deep water, because we're just that much far off the shore. What happens in 1825 is after that big roaring Santa Ana River leaves our back bay, it shifts all the time. It floods, it shifts, it floods, it shifts. And if you've lived here a long time and you've seen Fountain Valley underwater, you know that. Until we built the Prado Dam, it shifted constantly, overflowed, was in people's homes. So what happens in 1825 is it shifts for the last time. It shifts from about Long Beach, Los Angeles Bay, down to South Huntington Beach. And it comes out into this total marshy area. And you know this if you drive up there, because when you drive up there, there's water on both sides of the coast highway, isn't there? That's that whole big marshy area. They kind of carved it out to contain it, where it is now. But it came out, and as you know, because you all live at the beach, when you throw something in the water here, where does it go? San Diego, right? Everything goes south. So when 100 miles of silt hits the Pacific Ocean at Huntington Beach and runs along our shore, where does it go? Right here. And it starts to form the peninsula. So when that hits that ocean waves, it gathers up and it creates that peninsula. It starts in 1825. I'm going to go back to this later. So we're back to the 1500s, into the 1400s and the 1500s. Europeans do almost all their trading with China, but it takes a long time to get there, and it's dangerous. And so they are trying to find a better way to get there. Columbus says, I think that we don't have to go that way. I think we can go the other way, because I think this world is round. And if I go the other way, I'll come back around and I'll hit China. And that's what he does. He goes out, he goes where he thinks is India, of course, and he thinks he's in these islands off China. He goes back to Spain, and he says, I did it, and it didn't take me that long, and I got there. And they're like, really? Okay, we believe you, but we're going to send another guy and see if this is really true. So we're going to send them on the same route. So that's when they send, That's when they send Amerigo Vespucci here. And they say, cool, see if what he said is true. He comes over, does basically the same thing, goes back and says, he didn't know what he was talking about. This is not China. This is a new world. And so he's the one that coins that phrase, the new world. When he goes back, about 30 years later, a German is making maps, and he throws his name on there as America. So that's the translation of his first name. Okay, then we're still looking for this route. They haven't found the route to China. They found the New World, but there's nothing here that they want, really. They want all that spices and all the things that they can get in silk in China. So that's when they send Balboa over. And Balboa goes into those islands like where Columbus did, you know, Cuba and San Domingo, and he's off there and he's exploring. And he comes onto Panama Peninsula, walks across it, walks up the hill, looks out and sees the Pacific Ocean. First European to see the Pacific Ocean from the American side. Everyone else had seen it from the Asian side. And so he looks out there and he says, it's a very passive ocean. I think I'll name it the Pacific. And he's looking at it from a southward, down south way. And so he gets that named after him. And then, of course, we realized that later in like 1906, we named our peninsula after Balboa. Cortez. Coincidentally, he's up here in the Sea of Cortez. Okay? He's come in, he has conquered the Aztecs and claimed all of Mexico for Spain. And now he's over here exploring, and he's up in the Sea of Cortez. And he doesn't get high enough to know that this is not an island, right? And so he comes over here, and well, I know for sure it's after 1510, and I'll tell you why. Because in 1510, there was a very popular novel written in Europe about a group of Amazon women. These Amazon women lived on an island named California with their queen, Califia, and they ate men. They just kept them around long enough to have babies, and then they killed the little boys, kept the girls, and ate the men. And they had griffins for their pets, and they gave them little men burgers. Okay? So, when Cortez is with the natives, and they come up to this area, and they see this island that they think it is, the natives say, there are Amazon women on that island. That's the rumor. And they're thinking, Amazon women? I just read that novel on the way over here. That must be California. So we're going to name this California. They don't name it Baja California because they don't know it's the bottom of anything yet. Okay? So that's how that gets named, by Cortez. Oh, the other thing about Balboa is don't piss off the king. He got his head chopped off. Not long after he saw the Pacific Ocean. He overstepped his bounds as governor down there, and they sent somebody over to take care of him. In 1542, they are still, haven't found that passage to China. We just keep running into land, and we're still trying to get to China. So, there's another guy. His name's Cabrillo. He just so happens to be down in Acapulco, because we know why people go to Acapulco. The king of Spain sends him a message through the Viceroy of Mexico in 1542. He says, hey, since you're already in Acapulco, why don't you sail up the coast here? Look where that passage I heard is. It's probably the Columbia River, okay? Because Sir Francis Drake had been up there and stuff. Look for that passage. If you come across any gold, pick it up for me and claim everything for Spain. Thanks, good luck, love the king. Ariel, can you relate to this? Yes, you can. All right, and that's exactly what he does. He gets on his boat, he sails up, 1542, he has several voyages. This is the first one, he has 3 boats, right? He goes up the coast, he starts naming stuff. I think that looks like San Diego. I think that looks like Santa Barbara. I think that looks like Victoria Island. Do you know what that is? Catalina. Okay? Didn't stick, did it? All right, because there's always somebody after you. But anyway, Cabrillo goes up, he does some really good charts. He gets all the way up to Monterey, and he marks that it's Monterey. Does not find San Francisco Bay, because y'all know what happens when you go to look for San Francisco. It's covered in fog. All right? Didn't find it. But he goes back, he's got his charts. He starts to sail back down to Mexico, and he has a little Native American skirmish out on the islands, and he is killed, he is wounded, and he dies from that infection. He is buried, depending on what book you read, on any of the 8 Channel Islands. Not really sure. Probably either, they say Catalina, but I don't think so. Maybe San Miguel, but we're not positive. But anyway, his charts and his diaries survive. And that's the good thing, because it goes back to Europe, and now we can see the coastline, and he's claimed everything for Spain. 60 years later, they send Vizcaino out to do basically the same thing. Hey, just like they sent Amerigo Vespucci to check up on Columbus, they sent Vizcaino over. He's Italian. And they said, go over there and see if this looks right to you, and add to his charts if you can. And so it's exactly what he does. He comes up here, he says, okay, that looks like San Diego, that looks like Santa Barbara, that doesn't look like Victoria, I think I'll name it Santa Catalina. And so it becomes St. Catherine's Island after that. Now, this is the strange part. For 166 years, there is no written record of anybody else sailing up this shore. So the Native Americans that saw Cabrillo and saw Vizcaino didn't see anybody else. So generations had to pass on that information that, hey, there were these guys in these funny metal hats and they came by. Okay, so several generations later, they get to know that that happened. But nobody sees anybody since. So these Native Americans get to live in peace for all that time. Okay. Oh, fast forward 200 years. I'm doing Heidi Park. All right, this is one good-looking guy, and it mid-1700s. If you think he's good-looking, wait till I show you the first school teacher in Newport. Okay. Okay, King Charles III. He's got a big problem. He has had Cabrillo and Vizcaino claim everything for Spain, and now he's hearing through the grapevine, maybe a text, Ariel, that the Russians are coming down from, where they are up near Alaska, looking for otter, chasing otter down here, and the English are thinking about settling up in Oregon, and he's not happy because he said, "This is mine. I sent these guys over there, and I had a flag. I claimed everything here for Spain, but I know that possession is 9 tenths of the law, and I don't have one single solitary person possessing that island. I mean that shoreline. And who from Spain is going to go live in that godforsaken place? There's nothing." So he has to think up a plan, and he has a 2-part plan. He's going to use the Catholic Church, like he did in Mexico, to set up missions up and down the coast, and he's also going to give away land to nice, loyal Spanish citizens. The missions and the ranchos are basically the same thing, a cattle ranch. A mission is a cattle ranch with a church on it. They have the same income. They have cattle that they breed for hides and tallow, which is boiled fat to make candles and soap. And that's pretty much it. The ranchos that are given to the Spanish land grants ranchos are given to these loyal citizens who will promise in writing that they will be married, have a ton of children, have a ton of cattle, and a lot of ranch hands who will be married and have a ton of children. Because he wants people to be on this shoreline so that when somebody comes on, a Russian pulls up, they say, "No, no, no, go away, we live here. And we are citizens and loyal to the King of Spain." And so that's what he does. He sets that all up. And this is when we get to the shaking. Remember all the SHs? So we get to the shaking part of our story. He sends Portola, one of his best soldiers, Father Serra, Father Crespi, Father Gomez. They're in mid-Mexico. They get on a ship, and they have land parties and ship parties, and they come up to San Diego. They lose a lot of people on this voyage. They're sick. They've got scurvy. And so many of them cannot make the trek into the next adventure, which is to go up there and find that bay in Monterey that Cabrillo and Vizcaino told us was there. Because what we need to do is to set up these missions. We want to set up these missions 1 day ride apart and a 3-day walk apart, so that we have protection from the Russians and the English and anybody else who starts sticking their nose in here. So we want these set out equally up and down the coast. But first we need to go to Monterey, because we're going to set up presidios, forts, in 3 of these places. We are already in San Diego. We're going to set up a mission in Fort there, and we're going to leave Cerro high because he's sick and he's injured. His leg hurts, and he can't go any farther after that big voyage. So he's going to stay there and do that. So Crespi's going to step up. He's the lieutenant father here, and they're going to go up the coast and find Monterey. They're going to walk. Most of them, they have a group of 60 their food and provisions, and some Native American guides as well. So they set off to do that, and they start walking, and they start naming everything. So anything they see, they name, and if it's a Spanish name and you know it today, they probably named it. So as they're coming up, all the little communities and all the towns that we know that have Spanish names are named by them. One of the fun ones that we talk about here, we do the name game here, is Trabuco Canyon. Trabuco is a gun, and one of the soldiers lost his gun there. And so now we call that Trabuco Canyon, Trabuco Creek, because of that gun that was left there. So there's always some sort of reason. One of my favorites is Carpinteria. They're walking by Carpinteria, and there's Native Americans on the beach making canoes. Carpenters, that's Carpinteria. So they get up to the Santa Ana River. The closest they get to where we are, sitting in the water right now, is 10 miles inland. They come up to the Santa Ana River, and the funny thing, you can read, both Crespi and Portola have diaries, and you can read every single word that they wrote. It's on the San Luis Rey website. It's very interesting, and it's very funny, because every single place they go, there has been a scout that has gone out a day ahead and come back to tell them what route to take and if it's safe. And the Native Americans see them, the scout, and then they know they're coming. And they come out in force, in full dress, with food and seeds and instruments and everything to greet them. Mostly, I'd say 99% friendly. And they just want to be with them, and they can't speak the language, but they gesture, and they tell you in the diaries they wanted us to stay and become part of their tribe. Some of the chiefs break down in tears because they say, yes, we'll be back, don't worry, we'll be back. And so it goes on like that, and then they come to the Santa Ana River, and 52 men, Native American men, come down to the Santa Ana River to meet them. They're on opposite sides of the river. They cross, they leave the women behind until they find out that it's going to be safe. But they bring them seeds, and Portola is handing out glass beads to all of the Native Americans up and down the coast. They come, they camp in this area, and like so many times when they go up the coast, it's like the Native Americans came out, they greeted us, they asked us to do this. We asked them to go back to their village so we could sleep, but they did not. They sat there on the hill and they played instruments all night, and we didn't get to sleep. So they are annoyed. When you read the diaries, they are annoyed that these people are bothering them. Like, they were there first, but it's pretty funny when you read it over and over. So as they are camping on the side of the Santa Ana River, huge earthquake for that day. UCI has just done a study, 7.6. They think that it was a 7.6 earthquake from the damage in the sliding of the faults. What Northridge? Northridge was 6.3. So that's a huge earthquake, and they talk about it quite extensively in the diary. And so they have already named the Santa Ana Mountains because it was St. Anne's Day when they walked by them. And Father Crespi says, we're going to name this river the River of the Temblers, the River of the Earthquake. And if any of you have named a kid a name and then nobody called that child that name, you named him William, but everybody wanted to call him Will, you don't always get the name you want. The soldiers said, no, it's coming out of the Santa Ana Mountains. We're going to call it the Santa Ana River. So, too bad, Crespi, you named it a mistake. As they're going up the coast with these 60 men, they go up a route which becomes the King's Road, El Camino Real. And as they walk, they spread mustard seed so that they know when they come back down which way they came up. They went up because it will bloom for them by the time they get up there. They walk all the way, and the soldiers ride all the way up to Monterey and don't find it. They missed it, or they didn't recognize it when they got there. So that was great, and that's all they were doing. They were just going to find Monterey and come back. And so they came back without finding it. And the next year, they took off and they did the whole route again. And that time they found it. Still didn't find San Francisco. So, fast forward again a little bit, and we have this is the second mission that is created near us. The first mission that's created near us is San Gabriel mission in 1771. What happens is they put up the missions, which I said is a cattle ranch with a church on it, but you have to have people to do it. And the whole manpower, the whole plan on this from day one was that the Native Americans were going to be the manpower. They had done this in Mexico and fairly successfully. These were temporary land grants given to the Catholic Church. The property was supposed to go to the Native Americans after like 5 years. It wasn't supposed to be a long-term plan, just enough to populate the area. And we know that didn't happen. 1771, when we created the San Gabriel Mission, all of the Native Americans in our area, Catalina Island, several of the Channel Islands in this area, are taken, enticed, I don't know how you want to put this, but they ended up at the San Gabriel Mission. Once that happened, prior to that, everybody just called themselves the people. We don't even know what the people here called themselves prior to the mission coming because it was not a written language and we lost that. We called them Lugga, but that's a made-up name that was given to the natives. Once they go to the missions, in 1776 we get the San Juan Capistrano mission, they are now called based on what mission controlled the territory they lived in. So if you went to the San Gabriel mission, your name from now on of your tribe was Gabrielino. If you went to San Juan Capistrano, you were now a Juaneño. They didn't call themselves that. That was a Spanish word. It wasn't their word. But that's how they were identified from that day on. They went into the missions. A lot of work to do. They had come from a diet of plenty. Remember all the animals that I mentioned, the plants, and acorns are so good for you, lots of good nutrition. Rose hips, tons of vitamin C. They were very well fed, all that seafood, everything that they had to eat. They go into the mission, they get gruel 2 times a day. There's a big pot, there are several women that are in charge of it. It's like a porridge pot. There's no meat in it in the morning, and then they throw a little bit of rabbit in it at night, and then you eat it again. So, as you know, if you study, malaria or anything, when you go out and you try and cure diseases, you cannot cure them if the people are underfed or malnutrition. So, this is part of their downfall. So we have all the soldiers. The plan was okay with the church, but they did not tell the soldiers how to behave. And so they had to segregate the women into very unsanitary small areas. And so, of course, if someone got anything, even the common cold that they had never been exposed to, it went right through all of the women really quickly because they were held so tightly together. And if they had been married to another Native American, they were separated from that person too. So, and you can imagine measles wiped out about, I think, 75% of the population in an epidemic up in San Francisco because they just hadn't been exposed to anything. And so the plan didn't really work because they were, they didn't count on the fact that they weren't going to be able to be healthy in this lifestyle. You see Saddleback up there? I think we got kind of cut off in the front there, but Saddleback Mountain is up there in the background of this picture. So the reason this is important to us is because the San Juan Capistrano Mission area went all the way up to Santa Ana River. So you ever heard the word estancia? Estancia High School? Estancia means station in Spanish. And because you didn't want to have to go all the way back to the Capistrano Mission if you were out there as a cowboy working with those cattle, you could stay in the estancias. And there were 4 of those adobes along the Santa Ana River. That was part of the Santa Ana River. I mean, the San Juan Capistrano Mission. Okay, so the second part is Spanish land grants. So one of the Spanish land grants that's given is to Jose Antonio Yorba. And think Hope Hospital, Newport Heights, West Cliff, and all the way to the mountains. Okay? He was a soldier in the Portola Party. So, of course, they're going to give him some land. He was loyal. He asked for it, and he got it. And he has a cattle ranch. Those are the cities that encompass when you go through that area. And it's called Rancho Santiago de Santa Ana. Named after the river. Everything's named after the river. Okay, here is Yorba's, right here. Rancho Santiago de Santa Ana, and this would be your mission property down here. 1821, we have Mexican independence from Spain. But before that, I'm going to tell you, this is right at the time, 1825, when that Santa Ana River changes direction. So this is when our sand spit, which will become the peninsula, begins to form. So Mexican gets their independence from Spain, and they don't like the fact that they have all this Spanish land out there, because right there is Spanish land, right? You know, when you go off there to pavilions, that's Spanish land. But now it's under Mexican rule, and so they say, Yorba, we like you, you're kind of a good guy. You show us your letter from the King of Spain, and we're gonna let you keep your rancho. But the church, no. We're gonna take your land away, we're gonna give it to loyal citizens of Mexico. Some of the churches some of the friars got to keep the churches, some of them got sold, or rented out to other people. So, but depending on the different mission, they had a different history. So now we have this Mexican land grant. So the word went out, hey, we have all of this land that belonged to the Capistrano mission up for grabs. If you're a loyal Mexican citizen, you can petition to have this land. And the person who does it is Jose Andres Sepulveda. We have two Jose's, Jose Yorba and Jose Andres Sepulveda. When you think Jose Andres Sepulveda, I want you to think Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber, Jay Gatsby, depending on your generation. All right, total party animal. Beautiful wife, parties, horse racing, gambling. You never saw this guy without velvet and silver and leather. I mean, just a show pony is what he was. The hides and the tallow, the way they got out of here was through Dana Point. They took those hides and they threw them right off the cliffs. They picked them up off the beach and put them on the ships and took them out. And Richard Henry Dana wrote the book 2 years before the mast. Do you know what that means, 2 years before the mast? You've been on a cruise. Do you ever want to be in the front of the boat? No, if you go on a cruise, you don't want to be on the front or the back, because that's the tippy point, right? You want to be in the middle. He was the peon, he was an author. He did this, that's like research for his book. He slept in front of the mast for 2 years because he didn't have any seniority. He slept on the tippy part. So that's how he named that book. He wrote about Jose Andres Sepulveda in his book, 2 years before the mast. He says, the guy didn't even have a boat. He has all this shoreline, he owns it all. He doesn't have a boat. And it's very hard to catch a fish from the back of a horse. That quote is in that book. All right, we have Rancho San Joaquin, and remember I told you Heidi has a croaky voice? At that time, our upper bay is called the Swamp of Frogs. Swamp of Frogs, because there must have been frogs. And I want you to remember this, Red Hill was a very, very important thing back then. Do you guys know where Red Hill is? The actual hill itself?
Yeah.
You can Google it, it's still there, it's in the middle of a housing tract. Very red, in fact, there have been times where they have mined it for the mercury ore. But it's tall, and when you had to go out and say, I own this to this to this, you had to find things to look at. If you just stood up here on the block, you would see Red Hill without everything we have now in between. So that is an intersection of like 4 ranchos because it was a point you could pick. Some of them just said it's from here to that cow's skull to that cactus. You had to something to point to on these maps. It's kind of funny to look at them. But the bay, our upper bay was very marshy in the back, and it went all the way to Red Hill, all the way deep into Tustin. So to get around it, you had to go all the way around. And there was a very, very popular spring that tasted really good water up there, and so people did go up there quite a bit. He gets in this rancho most of the San Juan Capistrano property, but then he petitions for more, and he gets even more land. So he ends up with 50,000 acres towards the mountain, and from our upper bay all the way down to Laguna, and then all the way back. Now, in case you guys think these people were like country bumpkin cowboys, these are the 2 of the Sepulveda boys and one of the Yorba boys in the middle, having their picture taken before they leave for Harvard. Okay, they went to Harvard. There's lots of things online where you can read the letters their sisters wrote to them and that. So, and isn't he gorgeous? I think Yorba. I think that nice looking Yorba boy is awfully cute. Well, they're all cute. Okay, so we're going to backtrack just a tad here. We have several really important things that happened. First of all, we're in the middle of this really bad war, the Mexican-American War. Lots of people are dying. It's annoying. We want Alta California. The United States wants it. And Alta California, by the way, is California, Nevada, Arizona, Utah, New Mexico, and parts of Wyoming and Colorado. It's not just our state. It's a big old hunk of land. We want it. And we're fighting for it. And we're tired of fighting for it. And we keep telling them, just let us buy it. We just want to buy it. And they're like, no, no, no. We keep going to war and war. Finally, we say, look, this is it. Buy it or else. I don't know what the ultimatum was. But they finally agreed to let us buy it. And so for $15 million, we bought all of that territory. Now, this is really, really important because look at the date. 1848. Do you know what happens in the last part of 1848? They don't announce it till 1849, but it's in the end of 1848 that we find gold. Mexico would have never let us buy for $15 million when they knew that we had all that gold up there. So this was just a fluke that we were able to get it right before that happened. Otherwise, we would have been in a much more long, drawn-out war, and it would have been awful. So, of course, now we have this area with all this gold, so we want to make it a state, right? And guess who doesn't want us to be a state? Look at the year. We're coming into a lot of civil unrest down in the South. And now we are a state with a lot of money. So every single state in the South votes against California going into the United States. But they get overruled because there's enough votes to go the other way, and we do become part of the United States. We become the 31st state in 1850. Just to fast forward, that gold went all to the north because we were always going to be a free state, went all to the north, and it really did help tip that balance to supplying those the soldiers in order for the North to win the war. So again, now we have somebody new owning our shoreline, the United States. And they go and back and do the same thing again. Hey, Yorba, we kind of like you. You get to stay. Show us the letter from the king. Show us that you really owned it. But this time we want a survey. We don't want to just see that you own from that skull to that cactus. We need you to put up some money and get us a nice survey. So he does that. They go to Sepulveda, same thing. We need a survey. We need to see that that you have this rightfully. We're going to go out and talk to your neighbors, like your insurance agent does. We're going to find out if you're a good neighbor and if you should really keep this. So they go through and they confirm both the ranchos, but they say, oh, but we're not going to let you keep the beach. You can have everything else, but we're going to keep all the shoreline. That's going to become state property. Now, we are told you Sepulveda doesn't care. You didn't get off the horse and come down to the beach. So it's not a really big deal to them. So that's important to us later. Now, we're going to just go back a couple years, and we're going to talk about this guy. Scottish-Irish. Scottish means he's not happy to be in Ireland. James Irvine. He is the 8th of 9 children living in Ireland during the potato famine. Okay, they're not the poorest of the poor, but they don't have much money. His little brother William, and he know they aren't going to inherit anything. Not when you're the 8th and 9th kids in the family, right? It doesn't spread that thin. Usually in Europe, only number 1 gets something, right? So they decide, we got to get out of here. So they get jobs in New York City in a paper mill because you need a job in order to come over. And they get on a boat and they sail to New York City. And they're there for 2 years until they hear about, in 1849, the gold rush. Irvine's 19 when he sails over here, by the way. So they hear about this, they want the gold, they get on a boat, they sail down to Panama, and his record doesn't say this, but all the other ones do at this time. It's canoe, it's mule, and it's walk across the peninsula. They get across the peninsula, they get on a boat called the Humboldt, and for 101 days, they sail up to San Francisco. That's a long time on a boat. He meets 2 people on that boat. He meets Benjamin Flint, and he meets Collis Huntington, Southern Pacific Railroad. He has a bad poker game with Collis Huntington, and he holds it against the Southern Pacific for the rest of his life. That's going to be important later, too. Is that it on him? Okay, so they go up to San Francisco. They try mining, and they aren't really happy with it. And then they realize that it's the people like Levi, the rancho owners are making a ton of money because they had all those skinny cows, they fatten them up because all these men want to eat beef. So they start getting fat cows and send them to San Francisco. They're making a ton of money. It's not the miners, all the miners that are making money, it's the people supplying the miners that are making the money. So James Irving goes into the wholesale grocery business and he starts making so much money he can buy land in San Francisco, in the city of San Francisco. And just like an Irvine, he does not buy it and sell it, he buys it and rents it. That's what the Irvine does, right? So he's doing that. And then he hooks up with the nephew of Benjamin Flint, and then there's two, the Flint brothers, and Bixby, because they're in business with Hollister. You heard that name? From Santa Barbara? Hollister is sending loads of sheep over from Ohio. They're just walking them across. He went with the Flints and Bixby and 50 other men. They walked in several series, all of these sheep into Northern California and Central California. And Hollister should also be a name that you might want to know because in our dealings right now with the Banning Ranch, that was owned by Mary Hollister Banning. Okay? She was the second wife of Phineas Banning. So anyway, he's making all this money. Now he's going to be in the sheep business. So he and the Flints and Bixby, they buy a rancho in Monterey for those sheep. And who better to graze sheep than an Irishman, right? Sheep all over Ireland. He knew exactly what he was doing. All right, now we are at 1852. And we have Sepulveda back to Justin Bieber, okay? Justin Bieber, Jay Gatsby. Pio Pico, the last Mexican governor of Alta California, is Angelino, living up in Los Angeles, of course. And he is the counterpart of Jose Andres Sepulveda. He is the Justin Bieber of LA. And he is into anything gambling, anything party. And he has a horse called Sarko. And so he lays down a challenge. My horse Sarko can beat any horse in the land. Well, Sepulveda is not going to take that lying down. He has heard of a horse that has just arrived from Australia in San Francisco that was like one of the best racing horses in Australia. And so he sends his trainer up to San Francisco on a horse to see this horse that's just come in. And he gets word back to Sepulveda that it says, I see the horse. He's mangy and he's really skinny. And Sepulveda says, great. You walk that horse down here and you walk it right through the pueblo of Los Angeles, and I will make sure that Pico and all the residents are standing there and see that mangy, skinny horse come by. And then after you pass Los Angeles, come down here, I'll challenge him to a race in 3 months. Enough time to fatten that horse up. We know he's fast, we know he can run. So he does just that. They walk him right through the town, and the people laugh. Oh my gosh, this is the horse that you are going to race against our Sarko? Sepulveda lays down the bet. They both put in $25,000, 1,000 sheep, 1,000 cattle, horses, there's a whole bunch of stuff. But that's not just the bet, because the people in the town start betting with each other and the people down here. So they said all the way from San Diego to San Luis Obispo, there was a ton of money exchanged on this one horse race. There's Pio Pico, and there's his horse. Or actually, that's a horse that looks like his horse. We couldn't find his horse, and there's no pictures. But it was a cinnamon-colored stallion, right? Spanish stallion, so we picked one that we thought looked kind of close to it. I told you it was only 95% true. Come on. Didn't my disclaimer mean anything to you people? All right. The race is going to start. They bring, the Black Swan is the name of the horse from Australia. I don't think I told you that. They bring out the Black Swan. He has a very thin rider and an English saddle. Well, they've never seen that happen. Sarko has a very hefty rider and a Western saddle. It's going to be a 9-mile race. Right through what we call today downtown LA. 4.5 miles out, around a pole, 4.5 miles back. Francisca Sepulveda is Jose's wife. Comes up in her beautiful carriage. and she steps out of her carriage with a handkerchief full of $50 gold coins in 1852. Isn't the internet amazing? She starts handing out these coins to their workers from their ranch and anybody who's standing near the carriage so they can bet on the race themselves. Now, the challenge is seeing the race. You remember when they dropped all that mustard seed? Well, you can't even see Los Angeles. And that's really high. So there are people standing on rooftops, and there are people that are on top of buckboard wagons and hanging from trees to see this race because you can't, this mustard is really, really high. So, am I almost to the last one on this? Okay. So, the race starts, 4.5 miles out, and Sarko's in the lead. And everybody's like, great, because I bet my entire farm on this. My wife doesn't know it, but I bet the nest egg. Okay. They go to the turn, they're even. They come back in. Black Swan wins by 5 lengths. Because by the time they make that turn, that heavy saddle and that heavy rider has taken its toll. People are weeping. They have literally bet everything they own on this race. You ever seen that portrait? That portrait kind of hangs in the Bowers Museum. But with this embellishment, here he's got Yorbis 25,000 and his scroll from Pio Pico that says he's going to be delivered 1,000 horses, 1,000 sheep, and 500, those horses, sheep, and cattle. So, that's a lot of money. And he's on his way back to what will someday be the OC on his steed. He bought the horse after the race, so that's now his horse. It's one of the only pictures, you see a couple of them, but that's the one you always see. And it is, the original painting is hanging in the Bowers Museum. Doesn't look like that. All right, things are going to change quickly. We're starting to get some cities. Do you know Anaheim's the first planned community? These Germans were up in San Francisco, and they bought this stuff, but they didn't get to move there for 2 years because the pre-people came down and planned it out, plotted it out, put up the fences, started planting stuff for them. They're going to come down here and grow grapes for wine. But they need a port to send it out of, so they establish this. That's the next slide. They establish Anaheim Landing so that they can get things out of Anaheim. So that's established in 1857. Santa Ana comes in 1866, and Riverside in 1870. And this is a farm, the Wakeham Farm, and it's right near South Coast Plaza. So it gives you an idea of what those houses looked like back then. All right, now this is kind of fun. Riverside. Why is it named Riverside? It's on the Santa Ana River. Anaheim. Heim means home in German. Home on the Santa Ana River. Santa Ana on the Santa Ana River. So we have all these things that we don't even think about that are named after that river. And Anaheim Landing is up here. See that window pane? It's up in Los Alamitos. And it's not even a wharf at first. It's just a beach, and they take the wine and any kind of other crops they have coming out of Anaheim, and they put them on ships and send them out of there. In 1862, we have the largest flood on record in California and the surrounding states. Huge amount of rain. We had the Santa Ana River divert itself in 1825. Our peninsula, which is a sand spit still then, finishes in 1862. That flood just fast forwards all that silt straight ahead. And now we have a sand spit, and all of the records call it the sand spit because the Santa Ana River is still flowing through the bay. There's no way to get to it. I mean, you could walk across it at low tide, or you could swim over there, but there's no landform taking you to it. Okay, now Civil War transition. Hey honey, do you want to get on a covered wagon and go to California? No. But now we have a train that connects. So all of these people that wouldn't come before, now we can get out there in relative luxury. So, and we are have a whole lot of people displaced by the Civil War. We also have Irvine up in Northern California with a lot of sheep. And during the Civil War, what happened to cotton? It all got burned, or you couldn't get it out. So he's making money hand over fist up there. The ranchos, we come into, of course, after the biggest drought we've ever had, biggest flood, we come into the biggest drought we've ever had in 63 and 64. 75% of all the cattle in California die during this drought. So the ranchos, they've got to do the surveys, they've got to prove their land, now they have the privilege of paying taxes to the state of California. And they can't do it. They could have done it when they were selling those cattle up to the gold rush people, but now they can't do it because they don't have the income. So they start borrowing money, and they borrow money to pay that loan, and they borrow money to pay that loan, and they're just going deeper and deeper and deeper down into debt. That property that I just showed you, the San Ana and all that, Yorba's Rancho was split up by the courts because there were too many heirs, so that was sold off in little parcels. Sepulveda's ranch, he needs to sell. And so but he sells it all in one piece because he's like the only person that owns it. Now who do we know that's sitting on a ton of cash and is raising a animal that doesn't need a lot of water so survives the drought?
Yeah.
There he is, holding his sheep. He buys it, 50,000 acres for $18,000. How much money did Sepulveda make in that horse race? 25,000. He doesn't even get the horse race amount for this. So Oregon got a really good deal. Then he turns around and he buys the rancho behind it, which was one of Yorba's nephews, and he buys 3/4 of a mile of Yorba's rancho, so he gets the water rights to the San Ana River. This is one smart dude. All right, so that's the sheep, in case you're wondering. Now we have a new James in town. Remember we had 2 Jose's, now we got 2 James. We just don't have a lot of creativity in names in Newport. This is James McFadden. He's also a young man, he's 35, he's a widower. He comes out here from New York. The first thing he does is goes up to Wilmington. And Banning has created the port up there, San Pedro. Then he turns around and buys all that area next to it, names it Wilmington. Banning does, after his hometown, Wilmington, Delaware. So he's got the lock on that. And they said he took a little bribe now and then, so he had everybody in his pocket, which will be important later again. So McFadden sees this. Hey, it's a port. They don't even really have a port. It's just kind of a beach. It's not like an inlet. They had to make that later. But he says, hey, that's kind of cool. And you know what else he has hanging out on that wharf? A train. Okay, that's kind of neat. But he keeps coming down because the Yorba Rancho has been split up, and he buys a big hunk of land, which is basically South Coast Plaza. How much did he buy? 4,200 acres? Okay, he buys 4,200 acres of basically South Coast Plaza. He immediately sells off 1/4 of it to farmers. We've never had farmers. We just have ranchers. We've got a lot of cattle. We never had people growing crops down here. And they need fences because there's a lot of cattle and sheep running around. So they need wood to build fences, barns, and homes. Here's a little comparison. On the left is James McFadden. On the right is James Irvine. So both Scottish-Irish. They never, either one of them lived here really full-time. McFadden came and lived here for a little while because he got married again and had some kids. But he basically lived in New York. James I always lived in San Francisco. His kids are educated up in San Francisco as well. In 1870, McFadden is 37 and Irvine is 43. They definitely know each other. We're going to get to that later. But I think it's interesting to compare people because people don't think about, were they here at the same time? Yes, they absolutely were. He's a farmer. He's a sheep rancher. He's a flipper. He wants to buy land and sell it and make money. As you know, he buys land and keeps it and leases it to you for the rest of your life. He hates the Southern Pacific Railroad. He hates it because they've jacked up the prices to get the crops to LA, to the port up there, the Southern Pacific. So he doesn't like that they've done that. He hates the Southern Pacific because, do you remember? Poker game, right? So they have that in common. It's a bonding thing for them, for their friendship. McFadden's dream, shipping port. He saw that thing that Banning built and he wants one. His dream, acquire more land and keep it. That's the shipping. We're going to get into it right now. Here's a guy named Samuel Sumner Dunnels. Now, You've heard of Horton Plaza, San Diego? So Horton's living up in San Francisco, and he hears about all this land down in San Diego for sale. We have up on the hill in San Diego a Mission, and right under it, Old Town. That's the town. Nobody lived at the beach. They didn't want to live down there by the wharf. So it's all up for grabs, and Horton buys it for like next to nothing. Dunnels is the fourth person that goes and lives in New San Diego. He and his wife, he's from Maine. He is a very experienced ship captain. His father was a ship captain. His uncle was a ship captain. He used to sit on the floor they said next to the hearth and listen to his uncle tell him about stories of San Diego. And so they weren't living in San Francisco. Horton had a business office up there. They went in there. They bought an old hotel from him. It was only the fourth structure made, but the first guy didn't make a go of it. So they buy this old hotel from him. He starts because he has sailed up and down South America, North America, all over the world, and then he had a business in the Great Lakes for a long time. So, and you know how the weather is there, so he's super experienced. And he has this paddle wheeler, just like the one at Disneyland, okay? He is going from San Diego up to Anaheim Landing. Remember I told you what that was? Los Alamitos, that was over on that window pane over there? What I told you before? He's going up there and he has an extra load of shingles and wood that they didn't need down in San Diego. And he knows, oh, they're going to want that up in Anaheim Landing. But he has a problem. According to many reports, he owed money at Anaheim Landing. So he knows, and he's got a nice wife, Elizabeth, running the hotel down in San Diego. If I go up to Anaheim Landing, I'm going to offload all of this. They're not going to pay me. They're going to take it for the money that I'm owed. And I got to go back and tell Elizabeth that I didn't get any money today. So he doesn't want that happen. No boat other than like a canoe has ever come into our bay. It's way too dangerous. Too many sandbars. You guys have been to the Wedge. You know how those waves come in all those different directions? Super, super dangerous. But he has an incentive. He wants his money. And he also has a paddle wheeler. If you have a paddle wheeler, you get stuck on a sandbar, you can just put it in reverse. And it's very shallow. He can go into shallow water. So what he does, he ignores all signs of danger. And he comes into the bay. And he comes down here, around all these mud flats that will become Balboa Island. And down here, and he comes up here, and he goes down here, and he goes way back into the upper bay and says, wait a minute, I think I'll go back. Okay. He comes back, and he front loads that boat right there. And up on that hill, McFadden has sold a quarter of his land to farmers. Very religious, Methodists and Mormons. The ranchers, the new farmers, they call it the promised land. There's so much water, anything grows. In Fountain Valley, you know, they said you just shoved a pipe in the ground, the water just shot right out of the pipe. Just kept continuously coming out. So they were all happy up there. They called it the promised land. The ranchers made fun of them. They called it Gospel Swamp. And there's several areas in our Orange County area that were called Gospel Swamp at that time, but that was the big one. And I want you to think South Coast Plaza when you think of that. And almost all the way to our bluffs. So he comes in with this load of lumber, and these farmers that need wood for the fences and their barns and their houses, they are thrilled. They just beat it down to the beach with their buckboard wagons, and they buy that whole shipment of lumber and shingles. And they even bring him firewood, so he can steamer back to San Diego. So he's all happy. He's going to take money back to his wife. He gets in his paddle wheeler. He comes back out. This is like a miracle that he makes this. He comes back out. He goes down to San Diego. And guess what he says to Elizabeth? I found a new port. Now, Irvine and McFadden are thrilled beyond belief. McFadden's in New York, Irvine's in San Francisco. We know that McFadden wanted the port. He's jealous of Banning. We know Irvine needs a port. He doesn't like paying all that money to send his stuff up to LA on the Southern Pacific. So he wants a port too. So what do they say? Southern California is a place we ought to be. So they book it back here from New York and San Francisco, and they meet on the Irvine Ranch. And sitting in the meeting with them where they decide, hey, we can do this port thing if that guy got his boat in here. Mrs. G.B. Perkins, the wife of the ranch manager, is standing over them, and she says, you should name it Newport. So two different people get credit for that. It has nothing to do with Newport on any of our other coasts. It's just a Newport between here and Anaheim Landing. And then later it's condensed into the one word. So the landing pops up right there where I showed you where our Back Bay Bridge is, where the bridge is over the Back Bay today, over there where Will Wright's was, if you've been here that long. This is a house that Robert McFadden and his wife lived in. And there's these outbuildings, they're hanging fishing nets up here. There's up here, we didn't really get it in this picture, but there's kind of a warehouse where they stored things until it could be shipped out. But McFadden is smart cooking. He rents an acre, because Irvine owns the bluff up there where the Castaways is. He owns that bluff. He rents an acre from Irvine, and he puts a building up here with a silo and a chute, so they can shoot the barley straight down onto the ships. So they don't have to bring it down the cliffs, because it's pretty steep there. And they do this for like 12 years. They do it pretty well. But the mud flats are still bad, and people die, and a lot of the crops and a lot of the lumber end up in the bay or out in the ocean. And so it doesn't ever really go right for them. And McFadden's getting discouraged. And so he has connections with the Army Corps of Engineers in Washington, D.C. He calls them up and he says, hey, come out here, please, do a survey and give me money to dredge this whole port out and make this a big commercial port. And so they come out, they park their boat off the Newport Beach, not too far from the jetty, and they row in here and they hate it because it's dangerous and they think they're going to die and they don't like anything about it. And they do the survey and they say, no. And he's like, why? I want this so bad, please. And they said, no, we're going to give them money to San Pedro, because remember I told you Banning took a lot of bribes, so they probably did it for that reason. Plus it was a better place, it's closer to Los Angeles. They said, no, we got an idea for you. Okay, what's the idea? See right here? Remember this big raging Santa Ana River that came through here and made this really deep trench? Well, this part all got filled in when the Santa Ana River came through here. But there's still deep water back there. They said it's still water. You've heard still water runs deep? They said there's still water. We know it's deep. Just forget about this. Build yourself a big wharf and you can bring the biggest ships in the world in here. And so that's what he did. And wood is still a premium. So he took Robert's house and all those little buildings, put them on wooden barrels and floated them. This isn't here. Floats them right over the bay and sets up the little township of Newport Beach, because now we're on the beach. So that's where we get that name. Now, the landing, which was called McFadden's Landing or Newport Landing, is now called the Old Landing, and there's nothing there because they took all the buildings off. And this area up on top of it, I don't think I told you that, but the Gospel Swamp had become known as Newport, because Newport Landing serviced Newport. But now it's too confusing, we have too many Newports. So they changed the name of Newport up there by South Coast Plaza to Greenville, because they're really green, all the crops. So that's Greenville. You go up there today, Greenville School, Greenville Church, Greenville Street, it's still there. And then this is the Old Bay, but this is now Newport Beach. Santa Ana River, still running right through here, okay? We don't stop that until after my talk, because I stop at 1900, and we don't dam it until 1920. But where's Seymour? In Seymour, in Joseph Beek's book that he wrote, that I paid $75 for his little tiny paperback, and Heidi's jealous because I got it and she didn't. He said that they called that bay chocolate and oranges anytime there was a big rain or a flood, because remember 100 miles of farm equipment, silt, animals, baby buggies, anything that wasn't tied down ended up in our bay, because that water is still flowing right through by Huntington Beach through here and out our jetty. So they dam that. Finally in 1920 they tack a bond onto the east jetty bond, and we get the money to build the Bitter Point Dam, and it's now under Coast Highway right before you go into Huntington Beach. It's redundant because once they cemented the sides of the Santa Ana River, they didn't need anymore, but they diverted that river out into the sea instead of through our bay. So that helped us a lot. And I wasn't supposed to tell you that because I was supposed to stop at 1900, but I just had to tell you. So he does this. He puts his wharf out there. But now he wants what every little boy wants. Am I in the right place? Yes. Okay. What does every little boy want? What did Banning want?
Money.
Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Township of Newport Beach. Little township grows up around the wharf. Okay. What does every little boy want? Train. Wants that train set. So, but he has a problem. He wants to go all the way on the end of the wharf, just like Fanny did, but he wants it to go up to Santa Ana. How's he going to know how much track to buy? He takes his friend, HG4G, and puts him in the back of a buckboard wagon. He ties a bandana to the top of the spoke, and he says, count every time you see the bandana. So for 11 miles, he counts. And then my husband, the math guy, says, well, it's just pi times this, you know, and then you figure that's 12 feet, and you times it by how many times you saw the bandana, and you buy that much track. And that's what he did, and he got his train. Wow. It's finished in 1841. Remember the buildings he floated across? There's one of them right there. He puts a station agent in there with nothing, no desk and no chair. And guess what that station agent's name was? Mr. Smiley, I'm not even kidding. That was his name. Now, McFadden is not in the passenger business. He's not in the tourist business. He's in the cargo business, but it takes a year to ship by water the cargo trains, cargo cars for the train up from San Diego. So for a year he's running this train, and just people are getting on it in Santa Ana. It connects to the Santa Fe, so you could get out at Riverside or go up in LA and come down and then come out here and spend a day at the beach. Only Saturday, religious regions, just like Chick-fil-A, you can't run on Sunday, okay? So he wants a chair. So he starts charging the passengers 25 cents. Just until he has enough money to buy a chair, and then he stops charging. So he gets his chair, everybody's happy for Mr. Smiley. And then he does that for a couple of years, and then Wilkinson, you may have heard of him, he was the station master that came after that, and he did that job for a long time. All right, and now more people are moving to Newport Beach. This is the Sharps and Salter family, and this is the most interesting picture. They had a hotel down at San Juan by the Sea, which is just south of San Juan Capistrano. They dismantled that hotel piece by piece, brought it up here in buckboard wagons, and put it together at the pier. And this was the boarding house for the wharf workers and some of the early people that lived here. But here we go. That one kind of just did itself too. Sometimes in the computer it doesn't look like this with these words. Okay, so this is Horace and Sarah Salter. Nice looking couple there. Okay, they came out here in a covered wagon right after the Civil War, so in the 1860s, and then they came here 1890s. This is their daughter May, her lovely husband Jonathan Sharp, and their two children Frank and Ethel. Horace was in charge of the stables, so if you came out here from Santa Ana for the day. Because before the train, he had graded that road. Oh, and put a train trestle across Santa River. Couldn't get across if he didn't do that. So if you brought your buggy and your horses, he was in charge of your horses that day. Right there at the pier, he took care of that, the water and all that. His wife ran a little curio shop right there. She sold seashells, she sold drugs, and she sold candy, and she did first aid. And she was the only person this side of Santa Ana to do that. So if you were having a baby, guess who caught that baby? She did. Sarah did. All right? And she had come across that prairie in that covered wagon, and so the people of Newport felt she was entirely qualified to do just about anything. May ran the boarding house, and she was a very good cook and famous for her seafood dinners. This is a good one. Jonathan was in charge of the water. The water came in by train, and it was kept in a big tank alongside the tracks. And so he was the one that allotted out the water. You go over there with your bucket. We even hear later on stories about Balboa Island where the people had to take their buckets over there and get their water. And this is the cutest thing of all. Frank becomes the first lifeguard in Newport Beach, and Ethel becomes the first telephone operator. So I thought, this is a great picture because it just shows everybody had a purpose. This is the Sharps Hotel. This is the one that they dismantled and did it. And that's May right there in front of the hotel. And this is the first. Remember I told you about that teacher? I was going to show you. There she is. Is that nice looking? You know, teachers didn't get married back then, right? Okay, and these are the kids. And I think this is, I think that's William Collins. Because William and Ruth are in the picture 2 years after this. And she's really little, so she could be one of these two. Okay, so that's our first school in 1894. And then this doesn't look like this on my computer at home either, but Heidi said, well, it's a mistake. And it says McFadden's Marvelous Mistake. And the marvelousness is for us, because what happened was when all these tourists started coming before those cargo cars came, they loved it here. And so when he wanted to make this into this big port city, they said, no. We like it the way it is. We like it clean. We don't want a port city. We want it to be nice for us. So the train does come, and this is like the social event. 3 times a day when that train comes in, there's quotes from people that said, we came down, if you lived here, we came down there to see what was going on in the world. We needed the news from Santa Ana to find out what was going on. And maybe someone famous would get off, and we wanted to see who was going to get on and all this. So this was like a big social thing. So these are the people that came in plus the people that went out. He ran a semi-successful business off that wharf for about 12 years, but he could never really compete with San Pedro. And so then there's the big con of 1899. He hates the Southern Pacific, right? But his railroad needs repair, and he's kind of ready to get out of that business. So he puts it up for sale, but he's never going to sell it to the Southern Pacific. But he gets a call from an agent working for Mr. Clark, who owns a sugar beet factory up in Los Alamitos. And he says he wants to buy it. And he's like, okay, that's good, as long as he's going to be loyal to the Santa Fe and, you know, not the Southern Pacific. And so the agent was really a secret agent because he worked for the Southern Pacific. They bought it, and they shut it down within 6 months because they just wanted to buy it to stop the competition to San Pedro. Well, he gets McFadden gets completely disgusted. He's lost his dream. He's going to go back to New York, and he sells everything he owns. 50,000. Yeah, how much? What's it's 1,000 acres for $50,000. If you want to disagree with that, I can show you 20 books that say a different price. Okay? Yeah, and he says it in an article, but we think he's bragging on it. So anyway, this is William S. Collins, 1902. McFadden sells everything to him. Now, McFadden had bought it for all $1 an acre. He bought half the peninsula, all these mud flats, the surrounding area, and then he ends up selling it to him. And everything from then on is a whole nother story. So if you want to know the rest, you can take our tour. Now you know why Heidi lost her voice this morning. Sunny Upper Creek, so you know where that goes in? That's where it would be, right there. Yeah. So I will tell you, Heidi and I know about 100 times more than we told you, because when we read all those books, and our tours were like 6 hours long, and we cut. So we can't answer questions.
Thank you so much. This is like amazing. Thank you so much, Heidi. We're sorry that you couldn't talk and share, but I don't know how you memorized all this. I can hardly remember my phone number, so this is good. Anyway, here's a little gift from us, yes. And I must say, these two ladies have brought us to a new level in our museum, another generation, because of all of this research, and that's our new exhibit. It's all about the river. That's where it came from. And also, Celeste has also started a series of instructions, classes, programs for the parties for the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, and we've had many here. It's very fun to watch what goes on, and she does these brief history lessons, and so it's been great. I just can't thank you enough.
Thank you.
Give me
a call if you want to buy it. Okay.
Balboa Island was Balboa. Range Beach. Yeah, they're close. But they don't put, they don't say.
And in Fountain Valley, they said that you put the pipe in and the water, so that's how they got. So we're gonna do this.
Yeah, you just call me and do this.
Okay.
So, but tell me you already did this. Wow. And start, it takes me, I add a little bit to this. So this takes me to Collins Island. And I start talking to Collins Island. The tourists like it.
Yeah.
They didn't take one great history.
Yeah, a lot of people you have
Did
there.
you, the kid that wrote that goes down to
I knew that there was like better from the came out here after the war, and so people had bought on the short sides, and they became.
Our life, they're so fascinating.
So I thought, geez, maybe I'd go
Is it because of the museum? Well, okay, you know. Maybe I'll try that pasta.
Yeah, I'm like dying in it, but.
Yeah, that's great. Has it been great to have him involved?
Oh, it's such a ride. It's so fun.
And then he's got, the history.
Got someone else.
Okay.
No, I'm gonna do it. I'll do that for you because we're gonna feature this. So we'll write a bigger article, but I can